tonight. How does Prigozhin's rebellion impact Putin's power? We've been talking about that. I want to bring in former CNN Moscow bureau chief Jill Doherty and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Evelyn Farkas. Evelyn, is Putin at risk? I mean, at this point, 24 hours now after the beginning of this, how weaker is he? And I mean, is it terminal?
Well, Anderson, I think you're asking the key questions. He is clearly weakened. There is blood in the water. I wouldn't be surprised if another member of the elite, one of the security force chiefs, perhaps his national security advisor, someone else is thinking about possibly replacing him because they've seen that there's an opportunity. I think Prigozhin failed probably because some aspect of his plan, some support didn't come through. Either that or, as the other correspondents indicated, he really didn't think this through.
I mean, I just want to ask you a little bit more about that, because, I mean, it's hard to imagine him making this push, or having his troops, I should say. I don't know that he was out. I doubt he was out in the front lead vehicle on this. Having his troops move toward Moscow. You know, you raised the specter of did he hope to have somebody already in, somebody with a certain battalion or whatever, maybe indicate that they would help out if they got to Moscow, and that didn't happen, and therefore that was one of the reasons he realized, or he just had a sense that he had overreached. I mean, there's so many things we don't know, but it's hard to imagine him thinking that he could go to Moscow with the troops he had. What would have been his plan? To try to surround the Ministry of Defense and arrest or kill the defense minister? I mean, it just seems hard to imagine.
I mean, Anderson, to be clear, of course, we are guessing here. We don't have the inside information. I certainly don't have access to intelligence, although it seems that our intelligence community was aware that Prigozhin was planning something. And the guys who used to work at Bellingcat, who follow all the open source intelligence, they also indicated that they thought he was planning something. So I think that Prigozhin's not stupid. He probably thought he had lined up more support. The fact that he got as far as he got tells me that he had some support. You know, he sat down with those officials in Rostov in the beginning and then kept proceeding northward. But his plan failed because he didn't get critical support that he needed, probably inside the Kremlin. And I don't mean Putin, I mean people around Putin. That's what I'm guessing. And his plan B might have been all along to get Lukashenko to bail him out and give him refuge in Belarus, because that's another interesting aspect of all this. Or the Belarusian dictator was just very clever and opportunistic in taking Prigozhin as his prisoner.
So, Jill, I mean, the Kremlin says Prigozhin gets to go off to Belarus, and yeah, and, Jill, I mean, you know, he gets to go off to Belarus allegedly, and all charges will be dropped. Do you buy that? Do you think he would even go to Belarus?
Well, Lukashenko and Prigozhin know each other. They've known each other for quite a while. Possibly, you know, I mean, it might be a good second step if your men are disbanded and are going to go into the, you know, the regular military. It might be a resting place, but Prigozhin, you know, I'm sure he's trying to figure out what his next move is. It's entirely possible, and but also, you know, where his next dime is coming from. I mean, this guy is in it for money as well. He's not professional military, and don't forget, he is the troll factory. The person who had the trolls that interfered in the American election a few years ago. He's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve. So, you know, he might find some other gainful employment being based in Belarus, which is under control of Russia anyway.
And Jill, what do you think this does to Putin's leadership in the eyes not only of the Russians, but of the outside world?
That's a really good question, because I think of Xi Jinping, you know, the leader of China, looking at this. He's already seen Putin botch the war. This is not good, I think, for any type of respect that the Chinese would have for the Russians. Must be in the basement at this point. It is more, it's really a disaster. And so it strengthens, China. China comes out looking strong in most of this, and Russia looking very weak and disorganized, which it really is, and chaotic. And then other countries, might be looking at Putin, let's say, as a source of selling weapons. North Korea, Iran, they too must be questioning, will Putin be in power? It's very unclear. So I think it weakens him domestically, very weak, and internationally.
Evelyn, I remember reading an oral history of the Emperor Haile Selassie in Ethiopia, and one of the ways he maintained power was keeping everybody around him guessing and kind of at each other's throats and not sure who to trust. It seems like Vladimir Putin has done that. That's one of his strategies as well. Allow Prigozhin to be, like one of our guests earlier, so it was like rats in a maze, gnawing away at the defense minister, having them at each other's throats, and kind of seeing which one, keep them divided so that they're not, trying to gnaw off Vladimir Putin's limbs.
Right, and he also did that, let's not forget, with Ramzan Kadyrov, the Chechen leader, who also went to Ukraine with his fighters and ended up disgruntled, but left the battlefield and, went quiet, at least when it comes to criticizing the war. Certainly didn't get quite to the level of Prigozhin. So Putin has had a knack in terms of, juggling all these different power centers, playing them off against one another, so he stays the man in the middle, the man in control. But he clearly lost control here. Prigozhin may have overcalculated, of course, but at the same time, Putin must have too. Putin clearly didn't see this coming. And this is the biggest challenge that he's faced since 2000 when he, took control of the country. So, there's blood in the water now. There will be people looking to see how they can take advantage of Putin. And that, unfortunately, means that Putin is likely to clamp down even harder on, on Russian society and to look for culprits now.
Yeah. Evelyn Farkas, Jill Doherty, I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Coming up ahead.